This is Black and White Makes Gray, a memoir of an interracial childhood by Judith Davidson. Chapter 2. Mom stopped me as I started up the big front stairs on my way to my room. 6 p.m. You have a piano lesson at the Albina Art Center. What? Remember, I told you that the band members are beginning a new program, and they will be giving music lessons to young people. I signed you up for the first session. Mom, I already take piano lessons, I protested. These are musicians with a different kind of training. It won't be like your regular piano lessons. And it's a way we can help the center through supporting their programs. If this is to support the Albina Art Center and civil rights, then you should be taking the music lessons, not me, I said with frustration. But I could see from the look on her face that there would be no avoiding the music lesson. At 5:30 p.m., I climbed into the station wagon, taking the passenger seat next to Mom, and we headed toward downtown, eventually to cross the river near the Coliseum and into the neighborhood of Northeast Portland. This was the part of Portland that only Black people lived in, or so I believed. I didn't think anyone I went to school with had ever driven to this neighborhood. Passed through it, perhaps, but never to go someplace and do something in it. Not like us. I didn't know exactly what my mother did at the Albina Art Center, but sometimes she wrote me or my siblings in to helping stuff envelopes and things like that. Although usually she worked with a group of other white women, it also didn't seem to bother her when she was the only white woman among many Black people. She made it clear to us, her children, that we shouldn't mind either. This proved, she believed, that we were not prejudiced because we weren't affected by color, meaning race. I had seen the jazz band play a couple of times during the summer at different concerts in the park. Some jazz was okay with me, but it certainly wasn't the Beatles with their great lyrics, thumping chords, and dreamy English accents. Very few things could equal the Beatles in my eyes. Instead, I found jazz to be all over the place. Saxophones and trumpets, pianos and drums, rushing under and over each other. Sometimes jazz didn't even have singers and words, just music. Jazz was not Peter, Paul, and Mary or Joan Baez. We had the records of these artists and played them often. My dad even took me to a Joan Baez concert, just me and him, and Joan Baez played some of the same songs that were on our record at home. Mom and Dad took Randy, Janet, and me to a Pete Seeger concert, and at the end we all stood up and sang, "We Shall Overcome Together." I wondered why Mom had dropped her interest in folk music so suddenly to become so interested in jazz. I couldn't imagine the band members of the Albina Art Center jazz band would want to teach music to a white girl like me. I knew I was no musical prodigy. When we got to the front of the building, Mom pulled the car up and said, "Go on in, and I'll be back in an hour. I've got some errands to run." "What? You're not going to stay with me?" "No, you'll be fine. You've been here before. You know them. Go on in and let them know what you are here for. I'll be back in an hour." "Oh, great," I groaned as I crawled out of the passenger seat. "Don't be late," I said, a squeak of desperation in my voice. I watched fearfully as the station wagon headed down the street. Yes, I had been here before, I thought, but always with you. I'm only 12 years old, and I feel you are asking too much of me. I wish I could have said that out loud. I pushed open the door of the building. Inside it was light, bright, and noisy. The band was assembled, tooting and blowing, getting their instruments ready to go. I looked cautiously around the room, but I didn't see any other young people. As I scanned the faces of the band members, I recognized a short, slight man named Les and a round-faced man named Cleve, both horn players. Totally wrapped up in their instruments, they paid no attention to my entrance. Next to Cleve was another man who also looked vaguely familiar. He was holding a trumpet and standing in the long line of horns. I'd seen him before someplace, maybe at our house. He was kind of on the tall side and had a long face with medium brown skin, large eyes, flaring eyebrows, and a strong nose. Note to Evan. Was this the first time I saw you at the Albina Art Center? Maybe, but maybe not. I could have seen you playing jazz with the band in one of the city parks or at one of my parents' artist parties. Randy says he doesn't remember seeing you once before the day you landed officially in our lives. Something was drawing my eye to you, however, on this evening, and this is where I think our official history starts, at the Albina Art Center, where I had been dropped off for a music lesson, the only kid, and almost the only white person in the room, Portland, Oregon, late in 1965 or early in 1966. In a corner far from the band was a makeshift table and some chairs, where Mom would often tell us to sit and draw or read as we waited for her. I made a beeline to this corner, sat down in a folding chair, and pulled out the book I'd brought with me. One thing about me that was just like my mother was that I never went anywhere without a book. Glancing at the clock over the heads of the band, I noted it was 6:05 p.m. I quickly buried my head in the book. At times like this, I survived by practicing my skills of denial, bottling up my anxiety and fears as I kept up a smooth, brave exterior. They didn't seem to realize I could hear the conversation, and I was furious to know they were talking about my mother. How did they know who she liked? Who was this Porter? Dad would really be mad, I thought, if he knew they were talking about Mom like this. But I wasn't going to tell him. My mother showed up at 7:05 p.m., exactly an hour later. She walked in with a big smile on her face and waved at me like that to know that it was time to leave. Then she turned to the band and waved gleefully at them. I watched as one or two nodded in response. On the way back across town, I told her, I didn't get a lesson. They didn't know what I was doing there. I am not doing that again. Oh, no, she said. Sometimes they just don't get it together. Sorry about that. Sorry? It was horrible. I was all by myself. But that's not true. You know several of them. You've seen them play at different things. That's not the same thing. I'm not a jazz musician. Don't make me do it again. When we pulled up to the house, I got out of the car and stomped up the front steps, leaving her behind, not even asking if she needed help carrying anything inside, which was the most rebellious thing I could think of doing at that moment. It was late spring, shortly after Dad left to go camping with one of his hiking buddies, that Mom said, I've got something really special planned for this weekend. We looked at her with anticipation. Les is going to come over and cook southern greens, she said excitedly. We looked at her blankly. It's a southern dish, she explained, a southern dish that black people make. We don't get to try many of those. I thought you didn't like Southerners, I said. I didn't say that, Judy. I don't like Southern racists, but this is different. This is about how black people from the South cook. So, what are we supposed to do? Asked Randy. Eat the food, said Mom, surprised at our lukewarm response. What if I don't like it? Asked Janet. Then you'll take one bite and thank them for making it, said Mom. Don't worry, I'll have hot dogs for you guys. This will be after you've eaten, but you can try a bite. I don't think we looked convinced, but she plowed on. I'm going to pick them up later and bring them over so they can do the cooking. Les is going to bring a couple of friends with him, and I'll take you with me when I go. Later that afternoon, she gathered the four of us up and piled us into the car. We soon found ourselves driving over the Willamette River on our way to North Portland. This time, Mom did not head to Killingsworth Street and the Albina Art Center, but instead she nosed the car through a series of streets that were totally unfamiliar to us until she was parked in an alleyway beside a small house. Note to Evan. At the time, I didn't think to ask her how she knew this route. When had she learned it, and whom had she been visiting? It didn't occur to me that there were parts of my mother's life of which I was unaware. With the self-centered beliefs of a child, I assumed when she wasn't with me, she was food shopping for the family, picking up my dad's starched and pressed white shirts from the cleaners, or maybe dropping by the library to renew some books. I couldn't imagine anything more secretive. I mean, after all, she was my mother. But she was beginning to live a life with secrets from her children, as well as her husband, my father. This is when the two of you were beginning to forge your relationship. Did you know what that would become? Did you have any idea? Or did you both simply follow your instincts without question? This is where Les lives. Come on, she said, and we all scrambled out to join her at the door. She knocked, and in a short time the door was opened by a very short black man, whom I knew as Les from the Albina Art Center band. Sitting in his kitchen with another band member, his friend Cleve, and with them was the trumpet player I had also seen at the Albina Art Center the evening when I was not having a music lesson. "Hello, Cleve," said Mom, nodding at the round-faced man. "And you know Porter, Evan Porter," said Les, nodding to the third man. Then we all bundled back into the car. My mother drove. Les, who seemed to be the chef for the evening, sat in the passenger seat, his lap piled high with shopping bags, holding his special ingredients, while the other two sat in the back seat. To finish it off, the four of us children squeezed into the way back of the station wagon. When we got home, Mom made us hot dogs and then sent us upstairs to get into our pajamas and play in our rooms until there was some food to try. She and the three men set themselves up with drinks in the kitchen. Mom had not invited any other people, no couples and no other women. That was a little strange. Also, she was wearing her navy knit dress with the stripes, which she usually wore to parties, with only 3 people. Was this a party? As the evening wore on, I left my room and went to sit at the top of the back stairs where I could hear the dull rumble of the men's voices punctuated by my mother's sharp rings of laughter. I wondered where my dad was right now and what he was doing, setting up his tent, lighting the campfire, joking with his friends. Note to Evan. I don't think it occurred to me to wonder if Mom had told him about this strange dinner party or not. I wasn't that suspicious yet. Had you and Mom become a couple yet, or was this the prelude? Were you aware that something was stirring, but still pretending it was all above board? Did you think she was using you? A white woman with a taste for the exotic, as some would have called it? It got later and later, and Mom hadn't called us to try any of the food. In fact, she seemed to have forgotten we were upstairs. I decided to go down and see what was going on. As I came down the stairs, the voices became clearer. "That's the man for you," said one voice. "Yeah, you got to watch out for the man," said another. "The man's got his eye on you every time you in his space, just watching, ready to pounce," concluded the third voice. Who is the man? I asked myself as I entered the kitchen. Note to Evan. The man, the man, the man. The first time I heard the term the man, it meant something important to your world, although I wasn't quite sure what. It took many years for me to build an understanding of this term. I wasn't born into it. I fell into it like a puddle I had failed to see in my pathway. Learning this term was one of the things that separated me the most from what I thought was white. To know this term as Black people knew it required experience I didn't have yet and couldn't imagine. You introduced me to this word and you schooled me in it over the years. It was a lesson only you could teach me. My mother was perched on a stool in the middle of the kitchen, cheerfully waving her wine glass in the air. Les was standing at the sink where the greens were still soaking. The other two were sitting at the kitchen table. "Oh, are you guys still up?" asked my mother in surprise when she saw me. And she laughed, like it was so funny she'd forgotten all about us. "It's going to take a while for this to be done, so you'd better all head to bed. Can you tell everyone it's time for bed now?" "Good night," she called after me as I left the kitchen, but I didn't say anything in response. I knew Dad was giving Virginia a bath in the big claw-footed bathtub in the half bath of my parents' bedroom, so I felt it was safe to ignore the other sounds coming out of my parents' bedroom. However, I started paying attention when I heard my father scream, "You are not going to the South to join the civil rights movement and leave me here with 4 children. Stop yelling. I have to go to a meeting. We can finish this when I get back. If you leave now, I can't be responsible for what I might do. I'm so upset. I don't know if I can stop myself. I might commit suicide." I froze when I heard this. Why would he threaten something like that? What were we supposed to do? I knew little Virginia in the bathtub was pretending like nothing unusual was going on. That's how all 4 of us reacted as my parents fought. We just pretended like we were deaf and stupid. It seemed to work on the adults because they never asked us what we heard, what we felt, nor did they try to reassure us. I came around to the back door of the room with the bathtub and peeked in at Virginia and Dad. I was in time to see my mother walk into the bathroom from the other side, connecting to the sitting room of their bedroom. Her mouth was one hard, tight line across her teeth. "Will you be okay?" she asked him. She said it very calmly, but it felt like the deepest anger I'd ever heard. My dad pulled his handkerchief out of his pocket. He always had one with him and sniffed as he wiped the snot from his nose. "I think so," he answered tearfully. "So you'll be okay if I go to the meeting?" "Yes, I think so." "I'll be back in 2 hours." And Mom grabbed her things and flew out the door while Dad turned back to Virginia in the bathtub. My parents gave 2 kinds of parties. Their formal parties were benefits for various civil rights groups. Those were the ones where we were allowed to show people upstairs to where they could put their coats. There was also another kind of party for artists, writers, musicians, and those types, where people just poured in the door and headed for the drinks. Sometimes when my parents had planned that kind of party, my mother arranged sleepovers for us at other people's homes. One time we came home from an overnight to find a wooden toy rifle broken in 2, the victim of an attack by a drunken peace activist. We kids were very angry about that, and the excuse that we were given, he was drunk, and the presence of the toy gun offended his political views, that was not satisfying. One evening, when an artist party was beginning to assemble, I walked into what we called the playroom on the first floor. Although we called it the playroom, it seemed like the real purpose of the room was watching the small black and white TV or playing records on the record player that sat on built-in shelves against one wall. Undoubtedly something my handy father had built. This time, to my surprise, when I rounded the corner, I found myself standing in front of the man named Porter from the Albina Art Center jazz band. Mr. Porter was standing by the record player, looking through our record collection. In his hand was the latest record my mother had purchased, a Billie Holiday album that Mom had been playing nonstop. I was about to leave the room, but then I realized this might be my only chance to make the point I needed to make to him. I stepped toward him, drawing myself up to my full height as I did, but given I wasn't as tall as Mom, that wasn't very tall. Then I locked eyes with him and said quietly but seriously, "You know, my mother doesn't like men who haven't been to college." He looked at me, his thick brows furrowing with surprise. At first, he didn't seem to understand what I'd said. Then he wiggled his mouth around almost as if he were trying not to smile. "Thank you for telling me," he said. I nodded to him, turned on my heel, and left. The more my mom was involved in civil rights, the worse my parents' relationship seemed to get. I didn't want to even say the word that started with die and ended with vorse, because if you said it aloud, that could make it happen. Randy said that word to one of his friends, and this kid told his sister, who was in my class, and she asked me if my parents were going to, and I told her absolutely not. Then she said she was only asking because my brother told her brother, and I was furious at Randy. Did he want it to happen? I knew of only one kid in my grade whose parents were divorced, and I thought of him as very strange. The longer my parents' arguments went on, however, I began to worry I would somehow mysteriously become like that kid, transformed from normal to strange because of the state of my parents' marriage. So I worked as hard as I could to make sure it didn't happen. If my parents had any idea how hard I had been working to keep them married, they would have had a lot more sympathy with my problems. Horrible nightmares, sleepwalking, and throwing up every Saturday night after they'd spent the day arguing. My throwing up finally got their attention, and Mom took me to our pediatrician. Dr. Busman was a tall man with a very thick, dark mustache, who had been my doctor all my life, and his predecessor had been my mother's pediatrician. He came into the little consulting room where we were waiting for him, closed the door, and leaned back against the wall the way he always did. My mother explained the problem, and he watched me intently as he asked, "So, is there anything bothering you? Any kind of problem with friends or school?" I realized immediately if I answered that question, I would have to lie to Dr. Busman, someone to whom I was never supposed to lie. I would have to lie to protect my parents' marriage. No one could know what was happening. "I'm having some trouble with math," I said softly. A smile lit up his face. He assumed he'd cracked the problem with his first probe. I felt sorry for him because he seemed so proud of himself, but I was relieved I had duped him. "Well, we can fix that," he said kindly. "We'll ask your parents to get you some help for that. Would you like that?" I nodded with what I hoped passed for gratitude. "But in the future," Dr. Busman said, "I hope you'll remember that we all need help now and then. No one can solve every problem they encounter by themselves." I heard what he was saying, but in my own head I was thinking, what did he mean? You should ask for help? You should depend on others? Was he crazy? Doing it yourself was the only way to get things solved. Take action. Don't wait for others. That's how I saw it. And if you don't know how to do it, hide the fact you are lost. Pretend you can fix it. But I was just a kid. What did I know? He had a few words with my mother about getting me help with math and said goodbye and left the consulting room. I hoped Mom was relieved I hadn't spilled the beans. Did she know, I wondered, how much I had risked going out on a limb to save their marriage? I was sure you could burn in hell or something horrible like that for lying to Dr. Busman. But I did it for all of us. When we got home, my mother explained to my father that I was having math problems in school, and as an engineer, he would need to work with me to help me understand my math. The cure was painful because now I had to try and do my math while my father continued arguing with my mother over my head. He'd give a little guidance in math and then jump up to jab another point at her and then jump down in a sweat to check my math. It was horrible, but I could endure it because I knew I hadn't told. As we moved more deeply into spring 1966, I wanted to warn my parents that they were in danger of losing everything. And by everything, I meant the house. It seemed like the house was a creature holding all of us in its arms. It held the happy, the sad, the tears, and the laughter. Without the house, we would all fall out into the world like water in a cracked bird bath, running down the pedestal into the ground. Note to Evan. Evan, I never asked you what you thought of that house where we were living when you met us. The big greenhouse on the hill? Did you like it? Or did you despise it as a symbol of all that was denied you because you were black? Everything about it, the neighborhood, the size of it, the view it had of all Portland, everything said white, 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 and you don't belong here. Did you feel that as you climbed the hill to where we lived? You didn't drive, so I don't even know how you got to our house. Did you walk like my father and I did? Did you take the bus up Vista Street? Get a ride with a friend? Or did Mom drive you? That would be like her, chauffeuring you as she would thereafter for the rest of your lives together. It felt like my parents' cries and screams were breaking the house, splintering its well-cured wood. The house was trying to hold it together for all of us, but it was becoming too much even for that strong being. Don't you love the house? I wanted to scream at them. You are hurting it. I could feel the wood creaking and sighing sometimes, or the trees in the woods huffing and shaking their roots. Maybe it was easier for me to talk about the pain of the house than the pain of me. Thank you to Westford Community Access Television for providing facilities and production support, all of which made this podcast possible.